All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for our webinar today. My name's Stephanie Baskerville. I am the content writer here at ProServe IT, and I'm going to be your webinar co-host here today. I'd like to welcome you to our session, which is entitled that Remote Work 105, Using Bots to Address Employee Wellness During COVID-19 and After. We've got a lot of great content for you today. It's my privilege to introduce my co-host for the day, and you'll just have to bear with me here. I'm not used to being the actual keeper of the slides, but there we go. So Alfero Chingono is our service delivery executive here at ProServe IT. He's got over 20 years in the IT industry, and 10 of those are with us at ProServe IT. Alfero describes himself as a forward-looking and hands-on software development expert. Alfero has got a keen interest in the future of software development, and he enjoys utilizing his knowledge and his experiences to combine people, processes, and technologies to continuously deliver valuable products and services that meet end users' needs and business objectives as well. So welcome, Alfero. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's a pleasure to be with you here.
Oh, wonderful. And before we get started, folks, I just wanted to point out a few kind of, I guess, house rules, if you will, or not rules, I guess, but just a few things that we want to draw to your attention today. First of all, if you have any questions throughout this webinar, I mean, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to use the questions tab on the GoToWebinar platform, and we will be keeping an eye on things so that we can answer those questions as they pop up. But yeah, please feel free. Again, don't be shy. That questions tab is open for everybody, and we can definitely address your questions as they come in. The second thing that I wanted to mention, and I did want to go on record to say this, is that while this conversation is about mental health, neither Alfero nor myself are actual mental health professionals. So the themes and topics that we are going to describe in this webinar are not to be taken as medical advice, just advice from people who may have been living through some things as well. So just a reminder about that too. So Alfero and I decided to start off our conversation today by taking a quick moment and doing an anonymous poll with you folks. And so I just want to say, we just wanted to find out, sort of get a bead on the idea of how are you all doing today. So let me just launch that poll here for a second. And I'm just going to launch the poll here. You can feel free, it should pop up on your screen. Feel free to select one of the following there and let us know how you're feeling today. So I'm going to let it kind of, run for maybe 30 seconds or so, and then we'll kind of collect the responses here. All right. Well, I'm very glad to hear that there's people that are saying they're not seriously struggling right now. That's a good, good sign, I suppose. I do see that there are some people, of course, that are, said that they've been better, and I completely understand and completely get that as well. And about just over half of you have said that you're doing all right, so that's okay. We're good to see that as well, or we're happy to see that, I suppose. A couple of people have said they're doing great, which is even better. I'm very glad to hear that. I am going to just close the poll here so that we can get back to the content, but looks like the results are kind of what I expected actually about this, and that's awesome. Mental health and wellness. I mean, it's a topic that is really, really near and dear to my heart actually. And oops, I think you're seeing me there. Sorry about that. It's near and dear to my heart, and the reason for that is because I myself actually suffered from depression for 24 years of my life, with 20 of those years on medication to assist me and help me to cope. Unfortunately, a lot of those years were spent under the stigma of mental illness, and for many of those years, I was really unable to truly open up about how I was suffering. So, I lived in a time where mental illness or the thought of mental illness or depression or anything like that was kind of swept under the rug, and that definitely impacted the way that I was able to actually cope and deal with my illness, and of course we're seeing a shift in that thinking now. I mean, there's advocates that have stepped forward and they're opening the conversation now on global mental health, and we've got amazing advocates and amazing artists and actors and singers and things that are coming forward, and they're really opening up this conversation, and athletes as well, actually. But it warms my heart to kind of see that and see those initiatives like the Bell Let's Talk initiative, or Mental Illness Awareness Week, or Mental Health Day. World Mental Health Day is in October, I believe. And all these amazing initiatives are here to help shed light on mental health and wellness, and to get people sort of talking more about that subject. And that is actually one of the big things that we wanted to talk about in our webinar today with you folks. Of course, we are in unprecedented times, and the global workforce has changed drastically in the last few weeks. We have seen more and more, people are being told to work from home or work remotely if they can. We're being told not to go out if we can. Some of us may actually be in areas where we are in lockdown, and that can really take, a massive toll on mental health. I mean, more people are worried or anxious about the future. There's really even those people who are mentally healthy are struggling, and that's kind of a little bit of what we've seen in the poll today that we did, and that's what this conversation that we want to have is all about. So I want to take a look at some numbers here actually with you folks, and I'm just going to say that the reason why I wasn't very surprised about our poll results there is because this is kind of conducive to what we're actually seeing and in the marketplace and stuff. And according to a recent study done by Morneau Chappelle, the majority of respondents, and that's 81% of those people, reported that COVID-19 pandemic is negatively impacting their mental health, and 32% of those 81% people said that crisis was either having a negative, a very negative, or a severely or significantly negative impact on their mental health, right? So, and the concerns that people are having about this, of course, people are worried about financial impacts. People are worried about a fear of getting ill themselves, or maybe having a loved one get ill or pass away, and 33% of those people are saying that the uncertainty around how the virus will impact their family is definitely weighing on their minds these days. And these are, I think this is pretty conducive of probably what all of us on the line today are feeling. I mean, I know myself, I'm feeling quite quite concerned about my elderly parents, and concerned about my brother and my nephew and things like that. So, and my sister-in-law. So, I want to. I would say that we're not alone in this slide here. But the next slide, of course, the good thing is that these feelings and emotions that we're experiencing, they are normal reactions to what's happening out there in the world. So, this is not, the feelings of moodiness or depression or anxiety. I mean, they're not clinical, but they're normal reactions to what's happening and the stressors that are happening out there. And the other good news is that you're not alone. I mean, some people, might look like they're doing a much better job of kind of keeping it together, or, they're looking good, or, they've put makeup on, or they've done something, and, you're on a video call with them and they look so put together, but meanwhile inside they're screaming. So, you're not alone. And we want you to know that you're not alone. That's really important. The not so good news is that unless you come from a background where mental health and wellness is freely talked about, you may not have the vocabulary to express what you're feeling right now during this time. Or if you've never experienced mental health before, or mental health issues before, you may not know the signs and the symptoms to be able to recognize what you're struggling with. So, you might feel that you're just feeling too tired, or maybe you're having an off day, your concentration's not quite there, you're not sure why you got so angry at your coworker or your kids or your spouse, over something that prior to the pandemic would have seemed very trivial to you. These are all signs and symptoms of where our mental health is at. And, the poll that we did at the beginning of this webinar, and similar kinds of polls, I mean, they're kind of a great effective tool at being able to get the pulse of the situation and see how people are doing, and in turn, how your employees might be doing throughout this crisis. However, setting up polls like this to be sent on a weekly basis or for a few times a week, or maybe even daily, depending on how you wanted to do, it might be very cumbersome. So a polling scenario, therefore could be that one of the first applications of where bots could play a role in helping us to get a bead on what our employees are feeling. And this is where bots are amazing. Well, one of the ways that bots are amazing. But, before we get into that conversation a little bit more, maybe Alfero, let's start right at the beginning. And what exactly are bots?
Sure, Steph. Bots are a very interesting phenomenon, and they are noticing a significant uptake in the industry right now in fields of customer service, customer support, sales, and recommendations. When people are making purchases, bots have been used to help buyers make the right decisions based on a variety of factors, and on training and onboarding as well. There are many applications where we have seen great success with bots in those areas. And the whole idea behind bots is to create systems that can function independently and intelligently. Now, the independent part, we are aware of it with technical systems like servers and all that stuff. But the intelligently part is where we've been investing significant amounts of time and effort to bring intelligence to computer systems. And in order to understand that, as you'll see on the next slide, we have to think of it in terms of the function of the human body. The human body is able to see things, make sense of things, and observe the relationships between what they're seeing and what they may have seen before, right? A human body is also able to move around and navigate their space, right? And be able to realize that what's in front of me is a path, or it's a tree, or it's a rock, right? And based on previous experience, if I try to walk through that rock, it won't work, right? So I have to navigate around it. This is all powered by, in a technology called symbolic learning. Now, a human being is also able to hear things and make sense of the sounds that it's hearing. For example, that sounds like a lion. That sounds like a car. That sounds like a car horn, right? If I'm crossing the street and I hear the car horn, it might signify that I'm in danger and I may have to act accordingly. A human being is also able to hear sounds and make sense out of them, that this is a language, right? And somebody's actually trying to tell me something, right, through the combination of words. This is in the field of statistical learning. A human being is able to, again, make sense out of things and their relationships, right? You look at two individuals, that can be, those two people can be spouses. Those two people can be a parent and child, right? All these things are, as human beings, will learn them over time by feeding, if children, feeding them large amounts of data, and then the mind is able to draw connections between the information that we feed it, and then use that information to make intelligent decisions. So if we think of it from that perspective, the idea here is to create systems that can function without constant supervision, and that can also make intelligent decisions based on the information that they're receiving at that point in time. And as you see on the next slide, chatbots have been gaining a wide range of attention lately, because by combining the ability of computers to receive and send information, we add the intelligent layer, right? So that the computers now can interpret, number one, the intent of the message that came in, and the expectation, right, of the message that came in, and then the context in which that message came in, and craft an appropriate response to the user. When they're implemented at their basic level, you're able to talk to a chatbot in a scripted fashion. Hi, hello, how are you? I'm fine. What's your name? My name is, Siri or Cortana or Alexa, whoever that may be. But when we get into the advanced scenarios, you can get into situations like, I would like to buy such and such and have it arrive on such a date. And the computer is able to dissect that complete sentence and identify the entities that are referenced to, the items that somebody wants to buy, the intent, which is the desire to purchase, right? And the expectation, I want to receive this item by such a date. And then combine all those things into a decision, right? If somebody is, for example, trading stocks, I would like to buy this stock when it gets to a certain price, right? And then the computer now has to monitor and then act accordingly when the time comes. So that's bots in a nutshell. And the context in which we're talking about bots right now is, how can we then use the learnings that we've been acquiring over the years about, artificial intelligence and about bots, and to augment our human abilities so that in times like these, we can help each other better, or we can provide more facilities to be able to support each other.
So, so let's sort of walk through maybe a scenario here. So I am, I'm just wondering how we can incorporate this, of course, into our daily routine, So is it as simple as basically like, I wake up in the morning, I, do my morning activities, and then I pick up my phone and I'm just trying to sort of see what my day is like. And then, I'm on Workplace or I'm on Teams, and a bot pops up and says, hey, how you doing this morning? Is that kind of like what we're talking about, Alfero?
Very much like that. Now, if you look at much of the applications that we see right now with bots, with chatbots in particular, we have chatbots that are integrated into systems and devices like Google Home, Siri, Alexa, where they're sitting there waiting for you to engage, right? Hey Siri, what does my day look like? And Siri interprets the message to say, okay, this person wants me to give them an overview of their calendar. And so Siri fetches your calendar appointment, and then it says, it looks like you have an appointment at such a time, right? That's the standard widespread application that we can see nowadays. And so that's one way, absolutely.
Okay.
Now,
excellent.
What we want to explore is there a way, right, in the context of mental illness, is there a way that we can make chatbots a little bit more intelligent to be able to initiate conversation when conversation is needed, or respond, right, when a response is required? Take it up a level further.
So like recognizing a pattern, basically, like if I was
and in addition.
Yeah.
Exactly. In addition, recognizing a pattern over a series of interactions, right? Then it's like, okay. So hypothetically, we can create a situation where somebody wakes up in the morning, right? And the bot realizes maybe they log in onto their computer or whichever, and the bot recognizes that they're active, and they say, hey, how are you doing this morning, right? Proactive messaging. The bot is initiating the conversation. How are you doing this morning? And they say, I feel tired today. Let's say that's the response. Okay, here are some tips on how you can improve your energy levels today. Something along those lines, right?
Have you had your morning coffee?
That's right. Have you had your morning coffee? Right, exactly. Provide hints and tips and guidance, in case, because sometimes, as we'll see on the next slide, human beings tend to be inconsistent sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Bots tend to have, well, computer systems, when they're programmed well and when they're functioning well, they tend to have an amazing ability to be consistent. Computer systems and bots as an extension, they also can be trained to be quite conversational, right? At basic level, like I mentioned, you can program a bot to just have a conversation that is scripted, mechanical, boring, predictable, but you can also create a bot that feels very natural, conversation that we've seen it showcased a few times on the internet. So it's possible. We have demonstrated that that's actually quite possible. And bots can also be trained to maintain context, right? This is the same person. I've talked to this person over the past few days, weeks. And to your earlier point, I noticed a little bit of a trend. This person has been down for the past few days. Maybe it's time to try a different approach. Mm-hmm. Maybe they need a different kind of help, right? Bots, to your earlier question, can also be integrated into multiple systems. Mm-hmm. Right now, you can go to somebody's website and you're just browsing information and a bot will pop up. Hey, looks like you're searching for information like this. Would you like me to connect you to an agent who, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You can have platforms like Microsoft Teams, Facebook's Workplace, right? You can have multiple, for example, SharePoint, document management systems, multiple systems that can be integrated into the same bot system, so that when a user is doing an activity on one system, that information translates to what they're doing on another system, and that data is aggregated to get a sense of, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What they're going through, what challenges they're facing, and then the system can determine how can I help.
Awesome. And that's kind of like into the next scenario a little bit. So let's skip over. We've got another two very short polls here, so I'm not going to leave them up as long. But basically just trying to ask a couple other questions here. You know, the next question that we want to ask, and I'm just launching the poll right now, so you'll see it pop up, but do you folks find it easy to talk to your manager or your supervisor about your mood? And I'll just give it a couple seconds here, you know, to change or to select your answers there. So far we're doing about neck and neck a bit. Oh, it just changed a little bit. All right. You know, I'll just give it like 20 more seconds or 10 more seconds. Yeah, I think we're probably actually pretty much done there. So, all right, let's actually close that poll. So I'm going to say that 65% of you actually said that yes, you are feeling comfortable with being able to talk to your manager or supervisor about about your moods, which is great. I'm happy to see that. That's awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I was expecting a little bit less than that. I'm not going to lie. But you know, 35% of you are saying no, you don't feel that it's easy to talk to or comfortable. You know, easy to talk to your manager. And again, I understand that as well. I mean, you know, I've struggled in many ways to talk to managers and things like that. I'll get to that in a second. The next poll that we wanted to ask you folks is, would you feel comfortable telling your manager or supervisor that you are struggling? So this is a different one, and I'm just going to launch this poll here, and let's see if this is similar responses to what the last one was, because that would be kind of interesting to see that. So I'll just give it about, you know, maybe 15, 20 more seconds here. You can vote to see which one it would be. Yes, of course, or no, probably not. I'm going to stick away from that conversation. All right, so let's close that here. I'm going to close the poll down. All right, so 62% of you said yes. You, of course, you would actually be okay with telling your comfortable telling your manager or supervisor that you're struggling. So again, that is not an answer that I was actually expecting.
Great audience.
That's a
Great
great
audience.
audience indeed. Yeah. So, I just wanted, 38% of you said not really know. And again, I totally understand that. I mean, there's not many people who are as comfortable, talking about mental health out there than there are those that are. It looks like our group here today, we've got quite a few people who are comfortable talking about mental health, and that's wonderful. I'm so glad to see that. Again, I would hazard a guess that the people that might not necessarily know how to start that conversation or know what to do about that conversation is probably because they just don't have that vocabulary, or they're not really aware of how to articulate what they're feeling, because they're just not, they haven't really been introduced to those symptoms yet, before. And that's, we said that before earlier in the webinar, and I mean, I have to say, like, when I was at my first couple of jobs, of my career, I really didn't want people to know that I was suffering from a mental illness, because I really didn't want them to think that I was crazy. I mean, I grew up, I was diagnosed at age 8. So that'll tell you, sorry, started showing symptoms at 8, diagnosed at 12. Excuse me. And that was a time, where I mean, in the schoolyard, I had a girl come up to me one time and tell me that her parents weren't going to let me play with her anymore because they thought I was crazy, that I was on meds, right? And at 12 years old, when you're, that really, really sort of self-conscious, trying to figure out the world stage, I mean, that is almost shattering, right? So when I got into my career and I got into the working force, I didn't always want people to label me as different, or label me as, heaven forbid, an attention seeker, or that I was expecting special treatment in any way. All of those things. I mean, I really didn't want people to think less of me because I had this mental illness, right? So, 1 in 5 Canadians, though, will suffer from depression at some point in their life, and I believe actually it's equal now in the States too. 1 in 5 Americans as well will suffer from depression at some point in their life. So, but I didn't want that label of different. I didn't want that opening up to my manager. I didn't want any severe issues coming from that, right? So, I'm glad to see that is not the case with this group here. That's lovely, but this, dispelling that stigma around mental illness can be very difficult, right? It can be a very difficult conversation to start. And, that bias that's there, whether it's conscious or unconscious, there is, we often bring a bias to this, towards people that might be struggling. Maybe not people on the line here today, obviously, but, in general, in real life, well, obviously we're in real life right now, but in general, we have that bias, and sometimes, it's a negative bias, and I think that's why a lot of people might have trouble starting that conversation. But this is where, bots can have another significant impact on the mental health discussion in the workplace. And I mean, I'm not sure about you, Alfero, but I have a feeling that bots could act quite as quite an effective icebreaker to start that conversation, wouldn't you say?
I would definitely believe that, right? To your point, there have been times where I wasn't feeling the greatest, wasn't very motivated, energy levels were very low, and for the most part, I didn't quite know that that those could be symptoms of, mental illness or depression or whatever they may be. If I don't know that I need to initiate a conversation with somebody, I wouldn't bother initiating the conversation, right? And if a bot is trained to initiate the conversation or to notice signs and symptoms and start the conversation, that can serve a very, very valuable purpose. And what psychologists and psychiatrists have also noticed is that when somebody is feeling low and they're not in their greatest mental space, they tend to retract from people. They tend to pull away. And so at that point, human contact can prove a little bit difficult, right? So if we have a bot that is trained and set up to initiate those conversations, and when it notices that there are some signs and symptoms of struggling, then the bot can take the conversation further.
Yeah, excellent. And actually, I think if I look at my next slide here, I believe so. The idea is that the bots, can they fill the gap, right? And I was actually doing some research about this. Apparently, in March of 2019, the Canadian Journal of Psychiatrists or Psychiatry published a paper about whether or not chatbots could potentially work to diagnose or work to even treat people. And the findings on this report were actually quite favorable, provided, of course, that the proper approach and the proper research was applied. They actually did see it as quite a viable solution that we may see bots treating diagnosing and or treating patients who need that assistance. I mean, to be honest, that's just fascinating to me that we could eventually be, I think of the number of people that don't have access to mental health care, and I think of the
Right.
number of people that have to wait for an appointment to go see somebody, right? And the fact that we're
Right.
probably within the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see this actually become a reality is just mind blowing and awesome. I love it.
Right. And like I mentioned before, we've been applying artificial intelligence to many different applications. Self-driving cars, putting planes on autopilot, all those kinds of things, which are abilities that we as humans have acquired over a period of time. What we're exploring in this conversation is whether we are approaching the stage at which bots could fill that gap, right? Where either we're dealing with challenges of attitudes towards certain types of behavior or certain types of illnesses, or cultural, dimensions that may make it very difficult to have those kinds of conversations, right? Or in times like this when things are really hectic, challenging, it's a busy time, it's a stressful time for everyone, even the bosses who are supposed to be supporting their employees. Could, right, bots step in to fill that gap and provide support both to the manager and to their employees, because both of them are in need of help right now.
And that, like we said before, I mean, that's kind of if we look at the next slide here, of course, we're in this together. I mean, we're not alone, and bots can be that great sort of bridging that gap and being able to be that icebreaker, and maybe even, be trained to connect people with either resources that they need, or healthcare workers, or EAP counselors, or things like that, right? I mean, it's important for us to know that we're not alone out there, and if the bot is kind of that connector piece to being able to open up that conversation and get over that hump of not being able to talk about it to a person, maybe people would be more likely to talk to a bot about it that's not biased, that's not gonna pass judgment, and really just kind of be that support system. Like it's not able to really, well, maybe it is maybe in the future we will be able to see it, that it actually has some empathy of some kind, or at least synthetic empathy. But
who knows? Yeah, exactly.
you can train it, right?
Yeah, and imagine, a day in the life of, right? Like we mentioned earlier, I woke up today, I'm not feeling the greatest, and I rate myself on a scale of 1 to 10, a 2, or a 3. The next day, I rate myself at 2. The next day, I rate myself at 1, right? And I'm teetering in the low end of the scale, right, for a period of time, right? Could we have a bot that could then, at that point in time, first day, oh, you look like you're not feeling quite well. Here are some exercise tips, or, get your coffee, whichever, right? The next day, have you been outside? Maybe consider taking a walk. Third day, hey, are you aware that your company has these resources that you can read through, or right, or browse through, or apply to your life, and we have these benefits that you can take advantage of, right? Fourth day, maybe it's time to talk to somebody, right? Would you be open if I connected you to somebody? I can make the call, and oh, yes, see what I mean? So that that bridge that might be desperately needed, because as I'm pretty sure you're aware, sometimes when we need help, we're not the best at seeking for help. And we may not even realize that it's time for us to seek help. So if there was a way for us to set up systems like that, right, I'm pretty sure that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's an incredible opportunity, I think, you know, for humanity going forward, is to really explore how we can sort of set up that help and give people that help. And like I said, I mean, the fact that we could potentially be able to use it, you know, in such an advanced way in the next little while. Actually, there are already a few, I think there already are a few bots that have been developed for the mental health community. I mean, I'm part of the mental health community on Twitter and things like that, and I have seen a couple things come up. So they're already kind of in early stages, which is great. I mean, it's so cool to see that idea, you know, this ability, and you know, certainly I think we can definitely use it, you know, but yeah, folks, I mean, you know, the important thing to know is that whether it's a bot that we use or if it's a person-to-person contact, you know, we are in this together. And I think that it's very telling that, you know, this virus has basically knocked out every divisive property in our lives right now. I mean, it does not care, you know, about race. It doesn't care about religion. It doesn't care about, you know, wealth. It doesn't care about how much power you have. It doesn't care about anything. I mean, it's indiscriminate with who it chooses, you know, to infect, right? So, I mean,
anyone,
you know,
can get it.
Sorry?
Anyone can get it.
Yeah, anyone can get it. And you know, like, so it's so interesting to see how so many, you know, nations and so many businesses that maybe, you know, at one point might have been competitors, but now they're just like, no, let's just work on it together. Let's just figure this out. I mean, you know, we are seeing humanity come together in an unprecedented way, you know, and it's so interesting to see that happening, you know, and just seeing the support that's out there, you know, and the support that's out there for people. And I think that we need to continue that even in our own organizations. I mean, I know that our organization, you know, our as Alfero can attest to this, our CEO, our president, sorry, Eric, has basically said, anytime you need a person to talk to, give me a call, you know, and we're doing social things, like we're trying to keep connected via virtual social events. I mean, you know, like, and just kind of that checking in, how you doing? And I believe, Alfero, we are in production of putting a bot out or something like that as well, like internally to test how our internal employees are doing too, right?
Yes. We are actually actively working on a implementation of a bot that can basically do the things that we're talking about. Check on each other, make sure that we're doing well, make sure that, and to your point about, you know, we're in this together. When one of us suffers, basically we all suffer. And that's the one of the things that we are realizing with this pandemic, is that we are all connected one way or the other, right? And so when we take care of each other, we take care of ourselves indirectly as well. And so investing in things like this is never a waste of time or resources.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Alfero, I wanted to sort of quickly mention the privacy portion of this, because I'm sure that's probably a question that might come up. You know, and I think we have a slide about that. If I just turn here, yes, we do. So let's have a chat about privacy and about what people should know about the privacy of these kind of bots that we're talking about.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's very important to realize that what we're talking about here is very sensitive information, right? And this is people's private lives, private realities, that information that they would love to have to guard jealously. And so, as with any computer system, right, the information that gets transmitted back and forth is open to, is subject to some kind of storage or persistence for however period of time. And it's subject to being analyzed and processed in however way that it might be done, right? And so it's very important for stakeholders and decision makers to think about privacy and put it front and center in implementations like this, so that even from a liability perspective, and so that the users who are going to be interacting with these systems understand fully what information is being captured, what information is being stored, what information is being analyzed, how it is stored, where it is stored, for how long, right? And that people's privacy is respected. Because as soon as that is violated, everything just basically grinds to a halt, right? There's nothing left. And when we're dealing with sensitive subjects like this, it's very, very important to put privacy and security, right, front and center. And here at Percive IT, those are some of the two things that we apply to everything that we do. Security, topmost. We want to make sure that, you know, systems that we put together, systems that we implement, have a security. Our implementations have a security lens to it, and privacy, that users' information is protected, and that it does not end up being used for unintended purposes.
Excellent. All right, I'm just cognizant of the time here, Alfero, and I know we want to leave a little bit of time for questions as well. So let's move on to, I believe it's next steps. So, you know, folks, I mean, we've talked a lot about, you know, how this particular pandemic is affecting people and affecting employee mental health and wellness. And I just wanted to kind of put together a couple tips that might be able to assist you. Now, again, I am not a professional, a mental health professional in any way, shape, or form. However, I did want to say I typically check in with my psychiatrist once a year just to make sure that I'm still doing all right and everything's good. And he was the one that actually gave me these tips, so I'm going to kind of borrow from him. You know, we were having a chat about actually about this webinar. I was telling him that I was going to talk about this webinar, and he said, well, here's some tips that I've been telling, you know, a lot of my patients. So it's not medical advice, but it's kind of medical advice, but it's not medical advice. If it works for you, that's great. Please don't take it as biblical or anything like that, you know, as law or whatever. But, you know, just a couple tips here. I mean, the first thing, of course, that he mentioned and that I agree with actually is that, you know, our daily routines have been completely obliterated. I mean, you know, you've got work from home now, you've got, you know, kids at home with you maybe, you've got, you know, all of a sudden your pets are like, what the heck's going on here? You know, why are you home all of the time? So, I mean, you know, creating a new daily routine and doing your best to stick to that routine is really important, I think, during this time. Yes. And then, of course, you know, limiting your exposure to news and social media. This is super important because, I mean, I hate to say it, but bad news sells. Good news doesn't always sell. Or if you're in social media world, it doesn't really get the likes that you're looking for either. So, you know, there's a lot of negative stuff on the news and there's a lot of negative stuff on social media. In fact, like I've taken a huge break from my social media because I don't even want to see half of this. But, you know, if you do need to get information, I mean, it is important to stay up to date on what's happening in your area, your city, your local, you know, if there's something that you need to know. So, but I would say that, you know, make sure that you're limiting your exposure and make sure that you're not going on right before bedtime as well, because that's can lead to interrupt sleep, which can lead to a whole other issue, a whole other can of worms, I guess, if you will. So limiting that exposure, you know, maybe saying I'm only going to watch it first thing in the morning for like 20 minutes, and then I'm going to watch it at lunch for like 10 minutes on my lunch break, and then maybe, you know, I'll turn it on at like 5 o'clock and just check the 5 o'clock news or whatever, right? So that's, you know, a good way to kind of limit that exposure, but really don't have it on in the background every day and all the time. Like that's just not going to be good for your mental health. Regular exercise is another one, and my doctor has been on me about this since I started going to him 24 years ago. He knows that I am not the most active person at times, you know, but regular exercise, you know, half-hour cardio a day. It can be difficult during this time, of course, because some of us can't get outside. Some of us, you know, our gyms are closed down, obviously, you know, so it might be a little bit difficult, but there are a bunch of YouTube channels and a bunch of, you know, options for online training, like in your home and stuff. And we would, you know, I would recommend that you check them out, because that 30 minutes a day of cardio helps you with the serotonin and the dopamine levels and making sure that your levels are all normal where they should be and stuff like that. So you want to make sure that you're keeping up that exercise. Plus, of course, it's not going to be very good if we all come out of quarantine. You know, what was it that I just saw on something? Somebody said that quarantine is the latest, or maybe even quarantine 20. That's, you know, the pounds that you're going to pack on. So we don't really want that. So regular exercise should help with that as well. And fourth, we want to, you know, give yourself time to escape from reality for a little bit. I mean, the world's kind of a scary place right now. You know, it's very uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. So, you know, it's really important to step away from that for a little bit. So, you know, pick up a new fantasy novel or a sci-fi novel if you're a reader, or whatever kind of, like, you know, fun stuff you like to read. You know, pick up a new novel and start reading, or binge watch a couple episodes of your favorite TV on Netflix, you know, or whatever it is. I mean, Cineplex, I think, is doing new releases through their app now or something. They've created something and you can actually go and rent like new releases in your home. You know, so, you know, whatever you decide to do to escape from that reality, that's really important, and your mind and your mood will definitely thank you for it. So, you know, keep that in mind. And if you can do an hour a day, that would be, you know, the most, I guess, beneficial thing, right? And then keeping up with your interests and hobbies, you know. I mean, these are super important to do. I mean, we can tend to get into, like, sort of, I would call it, like, I noticed myself, I've been getting into, like, what's called pandemic mode, which is like, okay, I need to shop on Amazon for these things. I need to look for in the store for these things. I need to make sure that I have these things done. And eventually, like, it just kind of takes over, you know, and it's not very mentally healthy for you, right? So keeping up with those interests and hobbies. I mean, you know, I'm taking a course through University of Toronto right now. I'm trying to keep up with my karate as much as I can through online training. You know, I've done a couple paint by numbers, which are awesome ways to just kind of relax and zone out for like 4 hours at a time. They're wonderful. I mean, I don't always have 4 hours at a time, but when I do, they're wonderful. You know, so keeping up with those interests and those hobbies, and really, you know, making sure that you are making time for those things, whatever you love to do. If it's singing, if it's painting, if it's, you know, whatever, right? We want to try to make sure that those, because you want some fun in your, you know, your day, right? Like, I mean, we're all stuck inside. We're all probably getting pretty sick and tired of these four walls that we're living in. You know, there's only so many times that you can go from the bedroom to the living room to the bathroom to the living room to the, you know, it just, right? You need a little way to break out of that routine and break out of that monotony, right? So that those interests and those hobbies are hugely important. And I think there's also a few things that we can do as well, you know, from regarding the bots that we discussed today. If I remember, Alfero, I think you have a slide here about our next steps for people on the line. Let me pull that up for you.
Absolutely.
There we go.
So here at Percive IT, we love bots, and we believe that there is a future with bots, and we want to give everybody an opportunity to try it out, right, and explore what possibilities there might be within their organization. And so if anybody would want to know a little bit more about what we're doing and what opportunities lie within their space and within their organization, we're open to scheduling a free demo and potentially a subsequent assessment, right, to see what can be done. And so, if somebody sends an email to cloud@perciveit.com or engage@line0.com, we'll be happy to schedule an appointment with you and sit down, talk about bots, and see what we can do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right. Thanks, Alfero. So, folks, we've got a little bit of time left here. I see we've got about 8 or 9 minutes before 3 o'clock p.m. So if you do have any questions, you know, we're opening the floor now. Feel free to type those questions into that chat. The questions tab on GoToWebinar, and we will answer them for you. And Alfero, we actually already have one. Here from Bill. He's saying, you mentioned trying to get a computer to think like a human. How exactly does that happen?
So that's a much bigger conversation, but the short answer would be through training. There are machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms that have been developed by very smart people. And so those algorithms allow us to train the system over a period of time with a set of with a range of data sets. And so just like we do with our 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, right? They get exposed to this information over a period of time. The first time they hear a certain word, they don't understand it. They just take it in, right? And sometimes they just reproduce it without really knowing, right? One of the first words the child would say is no, right? Mainly because they've been hearing it a lot. The parents say, no, don't touch that. No, don't, right? So the computer systems can be trained the same way over a period of time with a range of data to help it understand the relationship between the data that it receives and the information that it has gathered. That's the short version through training. And it's an expertise that some people have, and when it's done well, the computer system can do wonders. And that's when you get into scenarios where computer systems are doing much better than humans would, or doing certain things faster than a human being would.
So yeah, I mean, Bill, if you want to continue with that conversation, please email us at one of the 2 emails on your screen there, and we will be more than happy to assist you with that. We have another question here from Lisa. Lisa's saying, if I wanted people in my organization to use the bot, where would they go to use it? I think we've kind of touched upon this a little bit earlier, but let's maybe clarify a little bit for Lisa.
Yeah, sure. So what we generally try to do is to find the place where your employees or people in your organization spend the most of their time, right? There are certain systems within the organization where we tend to spend much of our time. In some cases, in some organizations, the place that we spend most of our time is Excel. In some organizations, it's Outlook, right? In some organizations, it's their, order and processing system, whatever that system may be. The idea is if we can identify that space and we integrate a bot into that space and we empower it and enable it to interact at the appropriate times, we can experience the highest engagements with those bots. In an ideal world, we wouldn't want a situation where somebody has to remember to go somewhere, right, to interact with the bot.
Sure.
Because the likelihood that they will remember is not very high. But if it's right where they are, then right in their face, then the chances of them interacting with it are much higher.
So again, for instance, I mean, the ones that we used, of course, were Teams and Workplace from Facebook. So if we're spending most of our day in those apps and those areas, then it's very easy to integrate a bot into those 2 things. To be able to use them, right?
Exactly. And one of the reasons why Teams and Workplace are the best places for stuff like this is because they are what you would call core applications or central applications to the operations of the business. They bring everybody together. That's where we do collaboration. That's where we do communication. And so they are natively built with the abilities to integrate bots, right, into those systems. So it becomes the most convenient, it becomes the easiest way to do it. But can it be done in other systems? Yeah, absolutely can.
Excellent. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in at this point, so maybe we'll kind of close those off and give you a couple minutes left of your day here, folks. But I did want to say, we just want to let people know that if you have any other questions about bots or about mental health in general, or employee wellness or things like that, we are always available to have a chat with you folks. So please feel free to email us at cloud@proserveit.com or engage@line0.com. And we can, our team is here to help, and especially during this time, we're like we said, we're all in this together, and we definitely want to be that assistance that you might need right at this point. So feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to ask your questions. I mean, there's, anything that we can do to assist you during this time. That's what we want to do for you folks. So with that, I think I'm going to say, thank you very much, Alfero, for joining us today and for sharing your wisdom about bots with us, and for having this conversation with me about what bots could do for employee wellness and mental health. And thank you all to everybody on the line for joining us for today as well. Like I said, at ProServe IT, we understand these are trying times, and we're here to help. And these the webinar series that we have been doing has been designed around trying to give you some tools and some tips and some things that you need to know, or you should know, or you might like to know during this time. And so we hope that this has been very helpful to you today. Again, any questions, comments, anything like that, cloud@proserveit.com or engage@linezero.com. But until the next time, we would like you to enjoy the rest of your day. And we want you to definitely stay safe out there for sure. So we'll leave it there, and we'll give you 2 minutes back of your day. But we'll talk to you soon, folks. So cheers. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Stephanie. Really appreciate you taking time to share your story and your experiences.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
We'll talk soon.
Awesome.
Take care, everyone.